In the early 1930s, nestled deep in the rural countryside of Missouri, there stood a farmhouse known as Briarwood. The house, like many in that era, was built with sturdy hands, passed down through generations of a single family, the Ackermans. It was simple, with white wooden siding and a wraparound porch. But what made Briarwood different wasn't the size or structure. It was the stories that seemed to grow around it like the thick woods that surrounded the land. For years, neighbors would whisper about the strange happenings on the property, but most dismissed them as local folklore, until the fall of 1935. That year, a young couple, Joseph and Mary Wallace, along with their 7-year-old daughter Clara, moved into Briarwood after purchasing the farm from the last of the Ackermans. Joseph, eager to start a new life away from the city, believed the land would offer a fresh start for his family. But from the moment they arrived, things felt off. It started small, a persistent feeling of being watched. Mary was the first to notice it. Every time she walked through the kitchen or sat in the living room, she could swear that someone or something was watching her. At first, she brushed it off as paranoia. They had moved from a bustling city to an isolated farmhouse. It was natural to feel uneasy in the stillness. But soon, Clara began to talk about the woman in the window. One evening, as Mary tucked Clara into bed, the little girl asked,
"Who's the lady that watches me at night, Mama?"
Mary's blood ran cold. She asked, trying to keep her voice steady.
"What lady, darling?"
Clara pointed to the window, her small finger trembling.
"She stands there. She doesn't smile. She just watches."
Mary rushed to the window, pulling back the curtain and peering out into the yard. There was nothing but darkness. She told herself it was Clara's imagination. But that night, as Mary lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was, indeed, watching. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. Joseph, ever the skeptic, laughed off Mary's concerns and Clara's stories as mere figments of their imagination. But one night, after returning late from working the fields, he experienced it himself. As he approached the house, the light from his lantern flickered and then dimmed, casting long shadows across the porch. From the corner of his eye, Joseph saw movement, just a fleeting figure, standing at the edge of the woods, watching him. But when he turned to look, there was no one there. From that night onward, Joseph's skepticism waned. The activity inside the house grew more intense. Footsteps echoed in the hallways at night, doors slammed on their own, and strange scratching sounds came from the walls. Objects would disappear, only to reappear in the strangest places. Mary's wedding ring was once found buried under the front steps, and Clara's favorite doll was discovered hanging by a string from the attic rafters. But it was the cellar that filled the family with the most dread. Beneath the house, the cellar was damp and cold, its air heavy with the scent of mildew. No one ever went down there unless they had to. Joseph stored tools and food supplies, but even he avoided it when possible. Clara refused to go near it. She said she could hear whispers coming from the floorboards above it at night. One chilly November evening, when the wind howled through the trees, Joseph was working late again. Mary sat by the fire, knitting, while Clara played quietly with her doll on the floor. Suddenly, Clara froze, her eyes wide with fear.
"Mama, she's back."
She whispered. Mary felt her heart skip a beat.
"Who's back, Clara?"
She asked, though she already knew the answer.
"The woman, she's in the window again."
Mary turned slowly, her hands trembling, and glanced toward the window. For a split second, she saw her, a pale face, framed by dark hair, staring intently through the glass. The figure was gone as quickly as it appeared, but the chill that filled the room remained. That night, Mary and Clara slept in the same bed, clutching each other in fear. When Joseph returned, exhausted and dirty, he found the house eerily silent. The fire had gone out, and the air was frigid. He climbed the stairs, intending to join his wife and daughter. But as he passed Clara's room, he saw something that made him stop dead in his tracks. Standing in the middle of the room, silhouetted by the faint moonlight, was the same woman Mary had seen. A tall, gaunt figure with hollow eyes, staring at Clara's bed. Joseph's heart raced as he blinked, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. When he blinked again, the woman was gone, as if she had never been there at all. Joseph didn't speak of it to Mary the next morning, but he was shaken. The family tried to continue with their lives, but the hauntings became more aggressive. One night, Clara woke up screaming, claiming the woman had touched her arm. When Mary checked, there were red marks, like fingers, on her skin. Desperate for answers, Joseph began to research the history of Briarwood Farm. What he found was deeply unsettling. The farmhouse had been built in the early 1800s by the Ackerman family, who had lived there for generations. But in 1887, tragedy struck. Lydia Ackerman, the matriarch of the family, had gone mad after losing all 5 of her children to illness. She was found dead in the cellar, having taken her own life after weeks of behaving erratically and claiming to see dark figures watching her. Locals whispered that Lydia's spirit never left Briarwood and that she was responsible for the strange occurrences in the house. As Joseph dug deeper, he learned that multiple families who had lived there after the Ackermans had fled the house, claiming it was cursed. They spoke of Lydia's ghost, a woman in black who watched from the windows and tormented those who entered her home. Joseph realized that his family was in grave danger. He attempted to sell the property, but no one wanted to buy it. He even reached out to the local church, but after a priest visited the farm and witnessed the terrifying events firsthand, he refused to return. The final straw came one night in late December. The family was awoken by a loud banging sound, as if someone, or something, was pounding on the walls of the house. The banging grew louder, more frantic, shaking the very foundation of the farmhouse. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence filled the air, but it was short-lived. From the cellar, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed up through the floorboards. Joseph grabbed a lantern and ran to the cellar door, determined to confront whatever was tormenting his family. But as he reached the door, the footsteps stopped. He opened it slowly, his hand shaking, and descended the stairs. In the cold, damp cellar, the air felt thick, almost suffocating. The lantern flickered as Joseph scanned the room. His heart nearly stopped when he saw her, Lydia Ackerman, standing in the far corner, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out, as if she were trying to speak. And then, just as quickly as she appeared, she vanished into the shadows. The family left Briarwood Farm the very next morning, leaving behind their belongings and the haunting memories of what had transpired there. The farm was abandoned once again, but the locals still talk about it. Some say they've seen the woman in the window at night, while others claim to hear the sound of whispers and footsteps when they pass by the property. To this day, no one has dared to live in Briarwood Farm again, and the house remains a decaying shell, holding on to the dark secrets of the past and the restless spirit of Lydia Ackerman.